Good morning. I'm Jill Erickson. I'm head of Reference and Adult Services at the Falmouth Public Library. And we're delighted this morning to have Paul Clerici come and visit us via Zoom. We are recording this presentation and it will be available on the Falmouth Public Library YouTube station, as well as FCTV will be broadcasting it. And you probably, those of you that are already here know we will be muting and hiding you during the presentation. Paul is actually joining us via his telephone, but he does have a slide presentation that accompanies this presentation. This particular talk is part of a series we've been doing. It was a grant that we got called Postcards from Falmouth, which is a Falmouth Public Library local history project made possible by a Library Services Technology Act grant and administered by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. And we are really delighted at all the programming that we've had, but we're particularly excited that Paul is here today because, as many of you know, this coming Sunday is in fact the Falmouth Road Race. Paul's book is called A History of the Falmouth Road Race, Running Cape Cod. And he is a best-selling author and award-winning former newspaper editor and sports editor who has written the authorized biography Born to Coach, the story of Bill Squires, Images of Modern America, the Boston Marathon, A History of the Falmouth Road Race, which he will be discussing today, and Boston Marathon History by the Mile. And I see that he also has run the Falmouth Road Race, which is also delightful. So I will now turn it over to Paul.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'll take you through the course, the history, the great races that's coming up on Sunday. Actually, the first photo is a nice aerial shot from NASA of Cape Cod. The reason I put this in circle where the course is actually people have asked me where the town of Cape Cod is if you live from out of state. So I thought I'd include that at the beginning for anyone here who's from out of state. And if you're not from out of state, it's a fun photo anyway. Maybe you can see your house. But it's a great photo. The next photo is of Tommy Leonard at the Elliott Lounge. He's actually talking to J.J. Leonard, a local race director. Some of you may know. Tommy Leonard, who passed away in 2019, thought of this race. It's all from him. It's an amazing man who really loved running, loved the Boston Marathon, loved the town of Falmouth, loved people. Most of you probably know of him if you haven't met him before. In 1972, when the Summer Olympic Games were on, he was working at the Brothers Four, which used to be a place up in the Falmouth Heights, which is no longer there. And he was watching the Olympic Games. Again, he loves running and everything. And Frank Shorter, an American, was leading the race. He was all excited. He was a bartender up there. And he stopped serving beer because he was sort of commenting about the race to everybody. And Frank Shorter won. It was on television. Everyone saw it. It was one of the excellent races. Really piqued people's interest in running. And Tommy said, "Oh, it'd be great to get Frank Shorter to run in Falmouth." And everyone laughed. And Tommy always said, when everyone didn't believe me or scoffed at my ideas, that made me even more determined. So he kept that in his mind. This is the 1972 Olympic Games. And within about, I would say, there's a confluence of happenstance helped create this race. Between about 1970 and 72, Tommy Leonard, John and Lucia Carroll, Rich and Kathy Sherman found themselves in the Cape. They didn't know each other, other than the couples who knew each other, obviously. Within that time period, early 70s, no running boom yet. There were road races and things. But Tommy, when he worked at the Elliott Lounge in Boston, he did a lot of things with Eddie Doyle from the Bull and Finch Pub, which became the Cheers, if you know the TV show. And they would have little road races between the two bars to raise money for things. So he always had that in his mind as things to do. So back at the Cape around here, John Carroll, cross-country coach, created the Falmouth Track Club to help some of the high school girls compete after the regular season. Because back then, once the season ended, that was it. But there was also postseason tournaments and things, but not for girls. They were for women. age group. So he created Falmouth Track Club so some of his high school girls could actually compete, but they needed funding. They needed some money. So Tommy found out about this, and he said, maybe we can create a little road race to raise some money to help the girls out. And Rich Sherman worked at the recreation department in Falmouth. So between all of them, they said, hey, let's do a nice little race here. So for the next photo that you'll see is the actual T-shirt of the first year, 1973. So on August 15th, 1973, which is a Wednesday, an odd day for a road race, but it was Tommy Leonard's 40th birthday. So they thought, let's do this race. We'll go from the Captain Kidd at Woods Hole, and we'll run along the shore, and we'll end at their Brothers 4 at Falmouth Heights. It's like a 7-ish mile route that Tommy would run on his own anyway, because he's run the Boston Marathon, and he didn't really figure out a distance yet, but he figured, let's go from bar to bar. That's what we do in Boston. So later on, they measured it. It was actually, John Carroll told me, from door to door, it's 6.999 miles. And over the years, it did vary depending on whose car was used to measure it. It did go from 6.999 to 7.5. So for your running logs back then, it wasn't certified until 2003. So for all those other races, it did range. And before Garmin, that you could really figure it out. So it was 7-ish for a while. The 7-mile mark was actually painted at Falmouth Heights. You could actually see the number 7 for many years. So they thought this was a great idea. Let's get a bunch of locals. 98 officially paid, as Tommy would say. 92 actually finished officially. And everyone could basically fit in the Captain Kidd, 98 runners. Everyone was in there. It was a rainy day on a Wednesday. But the T-shirt that Tommy created that you see does say Falmouth Marathon, which is interesting because back then, if you said road race, that actually referred to automobiles or motorcycle races. You wouldn't think of running. And marathon, everyone loves marathons if you're a running fan of the Olympics and everything, which Tommy was. So they put Falmouth Marathon so people wouldn't think it was a bicycle race or automobile. And they started, like I said, in Woods Hole, which is the next photo is a nice aerial photo from the Falmouth Historical Society, which helped with some of these photos, which is great. Right on Water Street in front of Captain Kidd. Again, there was 98 official entrance and 92 finished, which is kind of interesting now that we have around 13,000 on a regular year, which is kind of neat. But it was great. Most people lived around here. The Falmouth, Cape Cod people showed up, which was nice. They knew where the money was going. A bar-to-bar race was good. People liked that. Actually having it finished there. And I remember they were telling me that basically there was no course map, no starting line tape, no cones, no police telling you which turn to do and everything, because everyone was basically local. So they basically said just follow the person in front of you. Hopefully no one was from out of state too much that got lost or anything. The next photo shows a more modern start line. But that's basically the start line on Water Street right next to the Captain Kidd of a more recent photo. But it gives you an idea of what the start looks like. But it's really neat. It's a small street, so they have, back then with only under 100 runners, it wasn't, basically just said, ready, set, go, and everybody went. But now they have it in waves and pulses because of so many people. They send out, a couple thousand, about 1,000, I think it's about 1,000 at a time, then they wait 2 minutes, next 1,000. Like corrals to kind of space it out a little bit. Actually, the next photo shows you what the weather conditions were and who the leader was, David Duba. Excuse me, nice black and white photo from the Historical Society. That's Dave Duba from Michigan, who was just on his way to the Cape. A friend of his had a relative who lived near Woods Hole. He was a cross-country runner, and he goes, okay, I'll run this. But you can see the weather conditions. It was rainy. As I said, on Wednesday afternoon, which is, again, sort of an odd time, but Tommy liked doing things like that. Jenny Tuthill won the female division. It was a fun race, basically, just to raise some money. Tommy Leonard passed around a little cigar box. at the Brothers 4 afterwards to collect more money for the girls so they could compete. And it was a fun race. It was again in the rain. And once everybody finished, the finish line at that time, the first 2 years, was at the Brothers 4, which is, for those of you who don't know, because it's not there anymore, it's at the top of the hill when you go down to the finish line of the race. That's where there are apartments and condos there. That's where the Brothers 4 was. And the building was located like 5-10 feet from the curb. I mean, it was right there. You'll see a photo coming up soon. So you crossed the finish line, you basically took a left, you walked about 10 feet, and you're in the bar, which people liked. So the word of mouth went about that, and Johnny the elder Kelly, who lived on the Cape, he also ran. He was a big draw because everyone loved him. Like when he ran the Boston Marathon, he won it twice, came in second place 7 times. For most people, they always wait until he finished the Boston Marathon before they went home. So he ran the Falmouth Road Race, and everyone loved it. He was in his 60s, I think 65 at the time of the first race. I remember Brian Salzberg was telling me he was one of the gentlemen who has run every Falmouth Road Race. There are 4 now, Falmouth 4. And I remember Brian telling me that when he finished, went into the Brothers 4, he looked down on the dance floor there and he saw this older gentleman with white hair and a Hawaiian shirt dancing. Just dancing and dancing on the dance floor, and Brian was really tired. He found out it was Johnny Kelly. He goes, here's a guy double my age, dancing right after running the 7 miles. I can't even really walk around. He goes, guy's in great shape, which everyone knew Johnny was. So that was how the first year started. It was very small. There were a few races around, especially down the Cape. There were some as well, but no running boom yet. But people started getting interested. Like I said, with the 1972 Olympics, everyone saw an American, Frank Shorter, win the marathon, so that piqued people's interest. Title IX was passed in 1972 for equal funding, federal funding for boys and girls sports. So girls started getting more accessible for sports and running and things like that. Little road races started to come up. The Greater Boston Track Club, which started the same week as the Falmouth Road Race, separately though, in Boston, had a lot of great post-collegiate runners. They had a big impact in Falmouth that you'll hear about later. So things started to, looking back at it, and succession of events started to line up. At the time, you don't know when things happen, when they happen. So the following year, which is the next photo, you'll see Marty LaCory, 1974. Marty LaCory is one of our greatest runners. He was the third American high school kid to run a sub-4-minute mile. He's an Olympian. His brother Steve went to BC, and Tommy Linder talked to him to get Marty to run. They changed the race to a Sunday. Tommy said, if we're going to do this again, let's do it on a Sunday, which they did. And people knew Marty LaCory. I mean, everybody knew him. You can see from the photo from the Historical Society, all the crowd. This is the finish line up near the Brothers 4 is right on the right there. You can sort of see the finish line in the bottom right there, but that's Marty LaCory coming in second place. But you can see the crowd. This is just the second year, 1974. And the amount of people from 92 finishing the first year jumped to about 400 in 1974. By 1974, like I was saying, the running boom is just starting, but more people are running, more people are aware of it. Whether you're competing in the top runners or you're just running to run maybe your age group, you start to get a lot. So here's Marty LaCory coming to Falmouth. And Tommy Lennon had talked to Coach Bill Squires of the Greater Boston Track Club if he could bring some of his guys down, who everyone started to really know locally, and that included Bill Rogers, who had come in pretty well in the Boston Marathon at that time. He had not won it yet, if you know who Bill Rogers is, which I assume most people tuning in does. So the race got a lot of attention, and I remember talking to Bill Rogers about this for the book, and he said, I really wasn't afraid of, I respected Marty LaCory, but he's a miler, a short distance guy, and he goes, this is a 7-mile race. I'm training for Boston Marathon and things. He goes, I should win. He goes, I'm not really afraid of him competitive-wise. And he wasn't. Bill won, and Marty came in second. But it was an excellent race, really brought a lot of attention, as you can see from that Historical Society photo, of just all the people gathered there, which was excellent. Just to see that attention come into this town, which was nice. Debbie Ritchie was the first female, and it's just kind of funny. the disparity back then that when Bill Rogers won, he got a nice big trophy. When Debbie Ritchie won, she was a 15-year-old. She was telling me she got a hairdresser and a bouquet of roses. So it's kind of funny to see the difference back then, but still recognized as a winner, which was neat. Again, this is finishing at the Brothers 4. The next photo you will actually what the Brothers 4 look like. This photo Charlie Rogers took, Bill Rogers' brother, who took a lot of photos back then when his brother was running. That's what the Brothers 4 look like. So the finish line is just to the right on the road there. The sidewalk separates the building from the road. It's that close. So I remember Dave Dubert and those guys saying it was great. You just crossed the finish line. Like I said, turn left, I'm in a bar. So the Brothers 4 looked like. That was, again, about the top of the hill as you're going down to the finish line. That last final push at Falmouth Heights is what the Brothers 4, your locals will remember that. And it was great. They had great support. The first couple of years, first 2 years, that's where it finished. But then more and more people started to come. People would spill out into the field, the ball field back there where the Falmouth Commodores used to play, drinking and everything. So it got a little extracurricular activity there. So what they did is they actually moved for the following year, for 1975, down to roughly where it is now, just to give it more room. You can manage it more. So the first 2 years it did finish right up to the Brothers 4. But things were changing. That was the interest. The running boom was just really starting. A lot of people were getting into it. The next photo that you'll see, another Historical Society photo back at Woods Hole, you'll see the, Bob Hall from the wheelchair start right there. This is significant. In 1975, for that Boston Marathon, Bob Hall was one of our excellent wheelchair athletes. He went to school at Boston State College where Coach Squires had taught and coached. And he asked Coach Squires, I want to do, because he was an athlete, he won the mile and a couple other national wheelchair championships, that he wanted to do the Boston Marathon. So Coach said, all right, let's do it. There was no other wheelchair athlete that had ever done it. This was 1974, 75, when he thought about it. So Coach Squires trained him. It was difficult. Obviously, he had to adjust the training because of the wheels and everything, but he trained Bob Hall. And Coach Squires got in contact, and Bob Hall as well with the BAA. Will Cloney, the race director, finally said, okay, if we'll admit Bob Hall, and if he finishes under 3 hours, he'll be considered an official entrant, an official finisher. He'll get a certificate. So a lot was riding on this, because prior to this, again, no wheelchair athletes ever. And sure enough, Bob Hall finished in 2 hours and 58 minutes, became the first official wheelchair finisher. He basically, every wheelchair category you see in races now basically started from Bob Hall. He created this category. He created wheelchairs. He helped coach. Everything like that really started with Bob Hall. And him being a local from Belmont, he thought about the Falmouth Road Race and called the race and said, sure, come on over. So 1975 was the first year for wheelchairs, and Bob Hall won the first 8 Falmouth Road Races. And here's a nice, great picture of him from the Historical Society, of him coming out of Woods Hole, and you'll see the great crowds really starting to pick up, which was nice, because 1975 really brought this race to the forefront of the running community. For those who hadn't followed it before, the next photo, which is a nice color photo from Charlie Rogers again, it's from 1976, but the runners inside, you'll see, that I'll show you who they are, really catapulted this race. If you look at the photo from left to right, you'll see Tom Dedarian in the beard. Then there's Frank Shorter, Amby Burford with the beard, Beryl Salazar in the blue shirt toward the back, second row, so to speak. Then Bob Hodge from Greater Boston Track Club, Vin Fleming from Greater Boston, Randy Thomas, and then Bill Rogers on the right. In 1975, Tommy Leonard's wish finally came true. He got a hold of Bill Rogers, who got a hold of Frank Shorter, because they knew each other. And Bill Rogers had, by that time, won the Boston Marathon in April. Everyone who didn't know Bill Rogers before, us locals did, but he really threw himself on the map in running. Everyone knew Bill Rogers now. Everyone knew the Greater Boston Track Club, because Bill Rogers was a member of the Greater Boston Track Club, along with Alberto Salazar and Greg Meyer and all the other great American runners, and told Frank Short about the Falmouth Road Race. And at the time, Frank would run in Europe around that time. The different running circuits for an elite athlete. But Frank said, I'd love to run Falmouth. I'd love to stay local, because I get paid an appearance fee when I go to Europe. Now, to maintain his amateur status for the Olympics, the race couldn't pay Frank. So Bill Crowley, who owned the Captain Kidd and a couple other places in the Cape, on the Cape there, paid him like an appearance fee, which absolved the road race, if anything. I remember talking to Bill Crowley's wife about it years later for the book, and she said that they kept the canceled check. So if the Olympic Committee or the U.S. Committee or anyone wanted to find out where the money came from, they had proof. The race did not pay him. So Frank came, and he ended up winning. And Bill Rogers goes, Tommy and Leonard never thanked me for bringing Frank Shorter. He goes, I lost 2 Falmouth Road races to Frank. But having Frank Shorter, the gold medalist and excellent runner on his own outside of the Olympics, come to Falmouth in 1975. Again, this is just the 3rd year of the race. They, again, started with 92 finishes the first year, 400 the second year. It jumped to about, I think, 800 or so for 1975. Just, again, catapulted Falmouth and the race and everyone's knowledge of this area, especially with the road race. So really big interest at press conferences, interviewing Frank Shorter and Bill Rogers. They moved the finish line to the bottom of that hill a little bit, like I was mentioning. Also, there were 2 little facts that not many people know. There's actually 2 races in 1975 run simultaneously. The AAU, the Amateur Athletic Union, required you for their races to have an AAU card to be members, and not everyone was a member. So what they did is they ran the race, the Falmouth Road Race, but they also ran at the same time, for those of you who didn't have an AAU card, a fun race. But it was within the same time. So that's how they got away with, or being able to run the race without being an AAU member. So it's kind of interesting. There's 2 sets of results when you look it up, but it's kind of interesting. And Jo Benoit Samuelson won her first of 6 Falmouth Road races that year as well. So it was a big, big year. And Tommy Leonard always said that he really thanked, among many people, Coach Squires for bringing his horses, as he said, down to the race, which really brought more great attention. And you'll see in the next photo, another black and white photo from the Historical Society, just the jam-packed amount of spectators down at Falmouth Heights. It's unbelievable, still is. Although this year the ball field will be closed off to spectators. But all those years, you will see it packed on the beach on the right, the ball field on the left, just climbing up. You'll see tons of people everywhere on the roof of the casino. The interest just came everywhere. The bibs were still given out in a van at the start, which changed quickly. But Falmouth, even though it started to grow and started to get all this great attention and thousands of people knew about it, it still kept its small town feel, which was nice. Lucia's brother, Sebastian, who played with an orchestra, used his trumpet to play the call, the call to the post that you hear, horse races, at Woods Hole. For every start line that would come up, he would play that. I think the first year or two, he was actually on the fire stairs on one of the buildings that was kind of moving as he would play, so he did the rest from the sidewalk. It was a little moving around a little too much for his liking, he said. But he would do that, which a lot of people appreciate. It's kind of neat. The newspapers, they were really starting to focus, having sections of the paper about the road race, which was neat, which they hadn't had before. And actually, 1979 was introduced. 1980 it was capped. So it really started to grow with that interest, which I thought which is excellent. And the next photo you actually see again from the Historical Society back at Woods Hole. They really started to have to focus on getting some semi-crowd control because people would be milling about in the first few years. But again, as it grew and grew and grew into a couple of thousand runners, it was kind of difficult. So again, mostly local, but again, after the Frank Shorter and the Greater Boston guys with Bill Rogers started to come, everyone from outside of the Cape really started to focus in on this race. And you'll see a banner there from Perrier. Interesting story. Around that time, Perrier was thinking of sponsoring road races. And they're thinking about doing the New York City Marathon one year, and Fred Lebow, the race director that came to Falmouth, to run with some of his people, and was talking to Tommy Leonard about you should talk to Perrier. So Tommy did. He put on, as you said, his best suit, which had pizza stains on it, and his tie was crooked, and he went down to New York, where the New England division was, and talked to the president there. And he said, you know, it was like 90 degrees out, I'm sweating, and my forehead's all red, and I'm jumping around in the conference room, and my arms are flailing, and I'm telling them about the beauty of Falmouth and the road race, and you should really sponsor this. And he goes, about halfway through, they stopped him and said, you got us. Because your enthusiasm alone, we'll do it. We'll sponsor you. And you'll be our first road race. This is 1977, even before New York City Marathon, which is a few months later. So Falmouth was the first road race that Perrier sponsored. And they've done a lot throughout the years of road races. But Falmouth was the first one. So they gave a check right on the spot after a couple of phone calls to Falmouth, to Tommy. He's in New York with the check. He was like, this is great. We have it. So you got the banner, and it just helped other things too. But it really started to show other people know about this race, which was great. So in 1977, that's where you see Perrier sign started in 77. That was a banner that you see for several years. They just changed the year. But you'll see greater interest. And the next photo, the color photo from Charlie Rogers, is back to the finish line. In the background, you'll see the Brothers Four. Another marquee event was in 1978, the year after Tommy got that funding, which was great. The 1978 race had, in its field, had 9 Olympians, 13 sub-4-minute milers, 16 national champions. The interest was huge. It was a hot and muggy day, which usually is for the Falmouth Road Race, either hot and muggy or rainy, as everyone knows. That hasn't changed much. So you had a great, big, huge field with this race, and you had so much going on competitive-wise. And back to the Greater Boston Track Club, Bill Rogers was a member, Bill Salazar, as I was saying, Dan Dillon, Bob Hodge, Randy Thomas, great runners in this area that other people started to know about when they went to other races. And interestingly, Salazar was a young, maybe 21, 22 at the time, and he looked up to his fellow Greater Boston guys. And it's funny, at the starting line, Coach Squires, who coached them all, but they always said, you know, you're friends until the gun starts, then you want to beat that person, and then once the race is over, you have a beer with them, which is true for any athlete. So Salazar was sort of looking at Rogers and these other guys and seeing what they're doing, maybe emulating them. And Salazar was an excellent runner, too, back then, really starting out back in 78. So Coach Squires sort of noticed this, so he told Rogers, why don't you drink your water, stretch out behind the building here, you know, stay in the shade. And Bill Rogers didn't know people were looking at him, fellow athletes. So Bill Rogers hydrated, got ready. Salazar couldn't find him just fine. They all did their routine. The gun goes off. Everyone's running. Bill Rogers skips the first water stop because he's all hydrated. So Salazar goes thinking to himself, well, he didn't have water. I won't have water. Not knowing that Bill Rogers is fully hydrated. And it was that kind of a way, cat and mouse throughout. Rogers was very close in the second attack, very hot and humid, really bad day. And Salazar and Rogers really pushing each other because they were really, really good runners. I remember interviewing Salazar for the book, and he was telling me around 4.5 mile mark, he started to catch up, or wanted to catch up to Rogers right off his shoulder. And he just couldn't. He couldn't do that extra gear, and he was confused as to why. I go, what do you mean you're confused? He goes, well, I didn't know why. I should be able to. I'm training with him. You kind of know who you can stay with for a while because you train with him. He goes, I'm looking back now, and I'm getting heat stroke. He goes, oxygen's not going to my brain. But I didn't know at the time. I was just confused why I couldn't catch up with him. And it went like that for a mile or two, and to the point that he, to this day, can't remember the last couple, 2-3 miles of the race. Still can't remember it. And what happened was, as you can see in this color photo, this is at the finish line of 1978. Bob Hodge is closest runner. Right behind him is Greg Meyer. Behind him is Alberto Salazar, and Randy Thomas is behind him. Salazar was probably around 5th or 6th at the top of the hill where the Brothers Four is. And he was so dehydrated, so in trouble because of the heat that several people passed him. He came in 10th place, and he just collapsed at the finish line. His body temperature was 108 degrees, and the medical staff obviously recognized the danger of this. the fatal danger of this, actually, and threw him in a little kiddie pool of ice, which Falmouth had, which, interestingly, the year before in a medical journal, they had a story about having ice baths for athletes who overheat to bring the body temperature down, how much that was a great safety measure. And the medical staff at Falmouth was ahead of a lot of other road races, had it. August race in Falmouth near the beach, so they were really cognizant of this kind of danger with runners. And with 108-degree temperature, all sorts of stuff can go wrong, and did with Salazar. He was combative, which is a sign of the heat stroke. They put him in the ice to bring his temperature down. His father, Jose, was really worried to get into the hospital now. And Dr. Craig was like, no, we can't. We got to get his body temperature down now. He'll never make it to the hospital if we leave right now at 108 degrees. They gave him his last rites, actually, because it was not looking good at all. They finally got his body temperature down, brought him to the hospital, and he got several IVs of fluid. He did eventually come back for the award ceremony, which was several hours later, and he kept a gauze pad on his arm. It was kind of like a badge of honor as he's getting the 10th place trophy, kind of like letting the people know, hey, this didn't get me. Next year I'll come back, and Al ended up winning. Had a great stretch of excellent races. But it was a marquee race because of just the way these guys ran. I remember talking to Bill Rogers about it, and he says, we ran like that. We would run you to the ground. That was just how we were, competitive-wise. He goes, it was very primitive and dicey. That's just how we ran. And Salazar didn't take any offense by it. He goes, no, that's how you do it. Also, Craig Virgin was an eventual winner, one of our great American Olympians, and he remembers, he was struck by Bill Rogers. He remembers after finishing that race, Bill won. Craig saw Bill Rogers sitting in a chair at the ball field with a line of about a couple hundred fans ready to get their autograph. And Bill sits there for a couple hours and just talks to everyone, gets autographs like he does now. And Craig Virgin looks at him and goes, I'm going to model myself after him. That's how an athlete should be. So the interest was just going, I'd say, worldwide at this point. And the next photo from the Historical Society, you'll see a makeshift media press truck that sort of had to accommodate the press. More people wanted to know about this race, this little town in Cape Cod, because everyone wanted to run. All the great runners, you want to run against the best. They started seeing this race as being one of it. Despite the odd 7+ mile distance, they wanted to come here. So this press truck was sort of hastily built every year. Tony Revis, who always covered this race, still does, remarks one year that they were on this press truck, and it would go slow around the corner, and sometimes the leaders would have to sort of put their arm out to not get hit by the truck. He remembers one year that he heard a big clunk, and he looks out from behind the truck and sees one of the wheels pop off and roll into someone's front yard. It still worked. He goes, well, there was a bunch of other wheels, so we can deal with it. The next photo, color photos from Gus Canty, you see the Expo. Expo started to pop up. The first couple of years, some people sold stuff at the sidewalk at Woods Hole. Again, with this increased interest from the media, from other runners, from just people who wanted to watch it, they had to have an expo, which was nice, with different vendors. This is the old Gus Canty. Now it's at the high school. The next photo that you'll see is a real good sign of how this race enjoys and celebrates its history by bringing back former winners, which is real nice. Not a lot of races do that, but they do, which I thought was great. And here's a table with, at the top, there's Frank Shorter. Next to him is Bill Rogers, then Ned Kofleski and Joan Benoit Samuelson signing autographs, and they still do. They still bring back former champions. They have celebratory years, anniversary years. The Falmouth Road Race does. So it's really nice to see how they do celebrate that. The next photo that you see is familiar to a lot of people in the summer. The Bourne Bridge with traffic. In addition to the increase of interest, as I mentioned, is the traffic. So this is weekend traffic that a lot of people see at the Bourne Bridge. I remember Tommy Leonard saying that he promised people, because the second year of the race, if we don't get at least 200 people in the second year of the race, they'll jump off the Bourne Bridge. And lucky for him, they got more than 200, so he didn't have to jump. I said, can you swim? He goes, well, I don't think it'll matter if I had to jump. But that's the traffic that you'll see. The next photo is from the viewpoint of a runner at the start. So you really get a sense of what the start had become with all this interest. From curb to curb, just people. This photo was taken before the Pulse start, which has waves. So you just crammed everyone in. You got to know your neighbor. Everyone knew each other. But it was really neat because, like I said, in 1973, it was 92 finishers. Went to 400 the next year, 800 in 1975, 1,600 in 1977. By 1980, they had to cap it at 4,000. And this is just several years after the start of the race. So Falmouth, like most races that started back in the 70s with the running boom in the first half of the 70s, you were just reacting. You really didn't have a chance to be proactive and assume or guess hundreds or thousands of people are going to show up. You just did what you did when people showed up. So in 1980, Falmouth capped it at 4,000 to kind of take a breath and go, all right, we have to start looking back. What happened? They had meetings after every year to see how they can improve, but they had to look back and go, all right, let's take control of this thing. Because the running boom basically exploded. And Jim Fix, the author, did his books. And people just really wanted to run. They wanted to compete on the elite level. They wanted to compete on the age group level, or they just wanted to run. So all these different factions of runners wanted to go to the best races, and Falmouth was one of them. So everyone started to show up. So other things had to be, like I said, with the press truck and the expo to accommodate people, the number pickup, no longer giving out numbers in the back of the car at Woods Hole if you needed it that day of the race. As you see in the next photo, approaching Nautical Point Lighthouse, all the people, it was jammed with people, which was great. Falmouth was becoming Falmouth, synonymous with the race, and people started to really enjoy the Cape and the town and the community. I remember Matt Auger was saying, the assistant race director, he goes, you can have the greatest race, the greatest course, the greatest appearance of runners, but the community is not behind you, you have nothing. And that's true. Falmouth, they had their ups and downs, they had their adjustments like every race, every city and town had when they started a race, but the community has been behind them. And there's been changes along the way, obviously, like with anything, with any growth, from, like I say, from 92 finishes the first year to almost 13,000 in more recent years, which is basically what they've been averaging this year, notwithstanding. And you have to adjust and you have to accommodate. One thing Falmouth does, which I don't see in some areas, in some states and things, is you have a global international race, but you still have that small hometown feel. They still pay attention to the Olympians and the elite athletes, as well as the amateur athletes and those in the back of the field. And it's nice to see that. You don't see that in a lot of races. I mean, you have something, they're worried about people getting here safely, flying in from different countries and getting host families for the elite athletes and the press conferences and things like that. Then their requirements that they want to do at the expos for their companies and stuff that they have to schedule. And also the amateur athletes who, if they want to put their clothes in a little bicycle locker, a little locker at the starting line, that will be moved to the finish line for them. They'll be able to they want to ride their bikes to Falmouth Heights. It'll be in a secure area, and they get a bus to the starting line. Little things like that for the amateur runners, they still hold on to, and they still do, which I think is great. So that's nice to see with Falmouth. Again, that you don't always see. The next photo that you will see, Nautical Point Light, which is the first mile mark, is just very iconic, and people just love that. Even though it's wide open, if it's a hot day, you're going to toast, but that's fine. Going past that lighthouse. The next photo is interesting. John Carroll took this photo of Surf Drive. This is from 1991. The locals remember Hurricane Bob. That actually occurred right after the Falmouth Road Race, the same day. If it occurred several hours earlier, probably wouldn't have had a race, John Carroll was telling me. It had such a force when it came across Block Island, Rhode Island, and Falmouth that it actually moved the course, that you'll see the ripples right here. It actually physically moved the road to the point that the engineers, it almost took about a year to refix this. The race directions were telling me, the Carrolls and Shermans were telling me that it got close. They may have had to reroute the road race part of the course around Surf Drive. Fortunately, after about a year, or within that year, they were able to fix it. but it moved houses. It was a real bad, fatal hurricane, if you remember from back then. It came ashore so close to the race that the race had finished and they were cleaning up, that the Carrolls and Shermans basically told, for all you out-of-town volunteers, go home now. This was later in the day on that Sunday. And they basically, the remaining things that they were going to pack away at the finish line, they just put in a big pile, wrapped it up, and went home because the storm was coming. It was that close that they just missed coming with the race. That's an interesting little side note there. The next photo that you'll see is that last final stretch of the race, with the casino there on the left. It's an interesting little stretch down there. It's only several hundred meters, several hundred yards down there, but it's interesting that there's a crosswalk on the top there that you can kind of see there, and interestingly that in 1988 that sort of confused a couple of runners. Ann Hannum was winning, and Betty Jo Geiger was in second, really approaching her. And just at about that crosswalk there, Betty Jo sped up and passed Ann and sort of slowed down. And then Ann sort of recognized that I better pick it up if she's going to continue. And Ann continued down the hill faster, but Betty Jo had stopped. She thought that was the finish line, which everyone's like, no, keep going. And so Betty Jo picked it up again, but she ended up coming in second. But people had, some out-of-staters of different countries, confused at one point that little crosswalk. So you got to pay attention, actually. In 2003, Jen Ryan, one of the great American runners, when she was running, Olga Romanova and Catherine Dereba, the three of them were basically top three running for most of the race. And Catherine Dereba, I think around 4 or 5 mile mark, stepped off. She was injured. So it was Jen Ryan and Olga was in the lead, ahead enough that Jen couldn't see her. And then around this hill, around this area here, that you see the runners coming down, everyone started to cheer Jen, and they put a finish line tape for her to break. So Jen's going, oh, that's really nice, as the first American to break the tape. Like they do with Johnny Kelly at the Boston Marathon. Whenever he finishes, there's a tape across the finish line for him to break. So she broke the finish line. Everyone's cheering, telling her she won. She goes, yeah, thank you. I'm the first American. And I said, no, you won the race. She goes, no, Olga was ahead of me. And they said, no, Jen, turn around, look up the top of the hill near the crosswalk. That's where Olga was. The heat and the race just so drained Olga. She stopped at the top of the hill. And Jen managed the race so well in the heat, she ended up winning, which is a big aspect of this race, is managing that heat. You can be the greatest athlete. Like Bill Rogers said in the marathon, I'll humble you, well, so will this weather. You've had great Olympians not winning because you got to manage this heat in addition to the course and it being 7 miles. The heat is tough. It's part of it. It's an element of a race when you compete. So it's an interesting little patch there. And the casino by the sea there on the left, Captain Bill Sweeney's casino. You'd always see people on the roof and out the window cheering you on, which is kind of neat when you're running from the top of the hill. You can sort of see the peak of the building before the finish line. Nice little burst of cheering, which is nice. So it's another one of those neat aspects of the race, of the runner especially, that you see, like little landmarks along the way, like the lighthouse and everything, that sort of keeps you going. Another great point of the race, the next photo that you'll see is the Great American Flag that's draped over the finish line. In 1987, a veteran from Falmouth, Jim Garris, read about the Mount Rushmore American flag going on tour in the country. It's the huge American flag. It's 4,000 square feet, 300-pound flag over Mount Rushmore. And I think it's for its anniversary, it would tour the country. The flag was a big, huge flatbed truck. And if you had an event that you would like to have this flag on display, you let them know. So Jim did. In 1987, the Mount Rushmore flag was the first one that was unfurled and was draped over atop the finish line that you see. And they did that for a couple of years. The flag now isn't the Mount Rushmore one, but Falmouth continued that tradition, which is tremendous. It's a beautiful element of this race that people look forward to, and it's amazing to see them unfurl it with all the volunteers holding it because of its weight. Like I say, it's 4,000 pounds, so it doesn't touch the ground. They lift it up. It's amazing to see. But it started with Jim Garris in 1987. It's really neat. But you'll start to see they used to have an old chute system where you finish in that area there. The next photo that you'll see from more of a ground level of the finish line, you had the old chute system with popsicle sticks. From those of you who would run races, when you cross the finish line, they give you a popsicle stick with the number on it. That was your finish, and you gave it back towards the end of the chute where the official was to record your time. They had tape recorders. When there was so many runners coming at the same time, the volunteers would just say the numbers in order with a tape recorder. Your time was on top of the old BBC building, the restaurant down there on the left, on the roof. you had big numbers being flipped over every 5 minutes, so you would look up to see your time. All these different ways that would change and adjust over the years, which was kind of interesting. To see all those things now, obviously computerized and everything, but it's kind of neat to see that. The next photo from the Historical Society is the photo I used for my cover of the book, which actually you can see the 7 painted right before the finish line, which obviously don't do anymore. But it's just kind of neat to see the actual 7 there, and you see all the people on both sides. Again, the great interest of this race is just, it just brings so many people to the Cape, to the point that people have told me that they've bought homes here. The president of the Perrier that Tommy Leonard, who had spoke to, said that he got a rental here. He ran that year's race with some people from Perrier the first year in '77, and they fell in love with the Cape so much that they got property. They would rent here, and other people have bought homes here or summer homes or something because they just love the place, they love the community, and they're felt so welcome from Falmouth. So the impact that Tommy Leonard did with a small race for 92 finishers to raise money for some high school girls back in 1973 has become what it is now, which is just truly amazing, with the Shermans and the Carrolls taking this for so many years, just under 40 years to where it is now with Dave McGilvery and Jennifer Edwards and Matt Auger and them. It's unbelievable the way this race has just grown and grown and grown. The next photo you actually see of the ball field at Falmouth Heights, where you go to get your hot dog. The old Bill Doherty hot dog, I remember he was saying that at one point he had to find a better machine to actually pump out 1,000 hot dogs at a time, which is pretty good. Prior to that, it's like a little longer to get your hot dog. But you're on the field, you finished, you didn't care. You had to wait, you talk to your friends and everything. The next photo that you see of the volunteers in the tent, it's become such a tradition with these volunteers. You see families giving out water, same families year after year. If you run this race several years in a row, you see the kids grow up. It's become so ingrained in the town and the community. Like I said, you'll see family members helping out and eventually running as well, which is great. But just to see that interest, just community-wide and spectators, I love it. I love seeing that. The next photo, the next aerial shot of Falmouth Heights, the Historical Society provided this one. This really shows you how the ball field is, that little rectangle. And what's neat on the left that you'll see, I remember, I think it was Rich Sherman or John Carroll was telling me that they actually had to get a U.S. Coast Guard permit because I think we're the only road race that needs a Coast Guard permit. There used to be boats that would follow the race in the water because you could do that. Most of it, other than the inner harbor when you're going in and stuff, you can see from the water. So boats would be a woods hole, and they would just go follow the race, and you had this little caravan of boats going to Falmouth Heights. Well, that kind of dangerous because you had swimmers there to the left of the beach and everything. So they had to get parameters there. And also, if the president was visiting Martha's Vineyard, which President Obama did for several years, there's like a no-fly zone where the president is of 10 miles, I think it is, and Martha's Vineyard is within 10 miles. So you couldn't have helicopters or fly zones. So you had Secret Service was snorkeling along the beach looking for things, if there's any all sorts of added things for a race director that most races don't need, but that Falmouth does. And that stretch of beach there was interesting in the first few years because the police didn't want open public drinking of beer that spilled out into the Falmouth Height, the ball field there after the Brothers Four the first couple of years. People got sort of clever, and they would bury the keg in the sand the night before. and sort of mark it where it was. And then the next morning they would bring the tap. For those people who remember what kegs and beer taps were, find a little marker, uncover a little bit of the sand, and put the beer tap in. And you see these beer taps lined up on the beach. Well, the police got, smarter than that, and they used metal detectors to figure out where the kegs were and dug them up. So they don't do that anymore. But it was fun seeing the beer taps lined up. The next photo is of Tommy Leonard right outside of Captain Kidd. They dedicated the start line, which is now officially called the Tommy Leonard start line. And there's a nice plaque there that people can see and visit if you'd like. One thing that was great about Tommy Leonard is just his ultimate benevolence and selflessness, and just the things he did for community, for people, that everyone recognized and wanted to honor him, which I'm glad they did while he was still around to enjoy it. There's a nice bench down near the ball field. The Mass Ave Bridge is a Tommy Leonard Bridge when you run under that for the Boston Marathon, which is at the corner of Mass Ave there where the Elliott Lounge used to be, where he worked. So it was nice that everybody honored him. And then when he did pass in 2019, there was a nice little painting of his face at every mile marker. So it's really nice that Tommy was honored, that he knew all the people that he touched and everything. And so that, I'm so glad for that. And the last photo, will end this. It kind of shows the another effect and impact that Falmouth Road Race has and its offspring, so to speak. The Cape Cod Marathon and all their related races were created as extensions from the Falmouth Road Race with Courtney Bird, the Shermans, and Carol's influence of these different local races, which is great to expand running and expand interest in the Cape and everything, which is excellent. Joe Clencannon, a sports writer for local papers around here in the Boston area, created Litchfield Hills Road Race in Connecticut, 7-miler, based on the Falmouth Road Race. Tough race, tough hill there in Connecticut. Also a 7-miler, been there for several years, which is excellent. The Beach to Beacon 10K up in Maine, Joan Benoit Samuelson wanted to create the same kind of atmosphere and everything that Falmouth had, so she created that. She got some ideas from Dave McGilvery and the Falmouth Road Race to create a terrific race up in Maine, where she's from. The Falmouth Walk that Eddie Doyle and Tommy Leonard created 30 years ago that still benefits the community. Still walk. It's the day before the Falmouth Road Race. And interestingly, the Detroit Marathon. One of the organizers, when it was the Motor City Marathon in Detroit, came to Falmouth Road Race, unrelated to recreating something, and ran the Falmouth Road Race and enjoyed what he saw. So much so he wanted to replicate that in some fashion back in Detroit. So they sort of renamed the marathon to the Detroit Free Press of the newspaper, Detroit Free Press Marathon. And he wanted to have some of the same kind of perks and everything that the Falmouth Road Race had. So it's reached all the way to Michigan. So it's neat way this small little race that Tommy started and getting little free raffles, going from store to store with his little shopping cart and putting in purses and gift certificates and whatever he could collect back in 1973 to what it is now. It's truly amazing. Thankful to all the volunteers and the organizers and the community, the runners, the spectators, everyone has made this race what it is today. Huge international global race with that small town feel, which is why people keep coming back. So I hope you enjoy this little trek through the Falmouth Road Race course and its history. And that is it. I want to thank everyone for joining in.
Well, and thank you. That was really fabulous, Paul. I have lived in Falmouth for 30 years now, and I can remember the whole hurricane. I arrived shortly after Hurricane Bob, and that was, the photos were great. The stories are great. I had, and the photo, I love the photo of all the people on top of the casino, and I wish the casino was still there, but that was a great photo. And the whole history of Perrier is, their connection to it. It's fabulous. Now, my question for you is, will you be running the Falmouth Road Race this year?
No, not this year. No, I run a few times, which I enjoy it every year. And there's so many, you bump into so many great people. I remember one year before I really got to know Brian Salzberg, like I said, one of the four gentlemen now who have run every year. He's the one with the long white beard. A couple of years they had a ferry that runners could take to get to the starting line from Falmouth. And I'm sitting next to this gentleman with a white beard, and across from me is this woman who's sort of nervous. And I didn't know who Brian was at the time, and the woman was nervous, and we're like, "Are you okay?" She goes, "Yeah, I'm just nervous. My first time." I said, "Oh, you'll be okay." She goes, "How many times have you run?" I go, "I've run about 4 or 5." She goes, "Oh, is it really good?" I said, "Yeah." And I was telling her a little bit about it, and she asked the gentleman next. This is the 38th running when I met him, the 38th year of the race. So she asked him how many times he's run. He goes, "I've run it 37 times. This will be my 38th." She goes, "Wow, that's a lot." And all of a sudden, I wait. I look at him. I said, at the time, I said, "You're one of the Falmouth Five, aren't you?" He said, "Yes." I said, she goes, "What's that?" I go, "This gentleman is one of the 5 men who run every year." And he introduced himself. But it was so funny, bumping and goes, "Yeah, I kind of run them all." So it was really kind of funny. And, so she's like, "Oh, tell me all about it." But you meet all these great people on the course. They'll cheer you on. Whether, like I said, with Craig Virgin, seeing Bill Rogers, one of the greatest marathoners, just talking to everybody, it brings you back. It's an amazing town anyway. It's like a second home for me. My godparents have lived here for decades, so I love coming to Falmouth. That's great.
Okay, and I have to say, I live very close to part of the race, and every year I live just off of Queen Street. So every year we just walk to the end of Queen Street, and one of the great things is how many locals you still do see running the race, even in the trillions of people that show up, and how much fun and energy you get just from watching them race, and everybody applauding and everybody so happy during the day that the road race happens. It's really a great thing. And in your history, the other thing that I took note of was that, how many local people are still around or who we know. You mentioned Dr. Crago, who is my husband's, that was my husband's doctor. That everybody does get involved, and which makes it one of the great things. I do want to know if anybody who's listening has a question that they want to ask. You can just write it up in the chat, and I will share that with Paul. I also want everybody to know that there are signed copies of his book at 8 Cousins. And my question for you, Paul, is what is your next book project? Have you got something in the works?
I was actually thinking about, I just, in addition to the Born to Coach, the Bill Squires storybook and the Boston Marathon one, Modern America, I was thinking about either something on Steve P. Fontaine, or maybe even trying to update the Falmouth book to include all the neat things as they approach their 50th anniversary coming up. 50 years for any race, but especially this one, like I said, has grown. Can you imagine 92 runners the first year to, on again, this year notwithstanding, it's like 13,000 in a small town. I remember when I was doing the research, there were so many different things. Again, the race grew as the town grew, as the interest grew. So a lot of things were changing, and they were thinking about having a different course. Didn't want to have it finished down at Falmouth Heights and things, or too many runners and everything. But as the town, the growing pains as the town and the race worked together, it's become what it has. Some towns that started races in the 70s didn't, and they're no longer here. So that's why I told you, like that Matt Alger quote that he was telling me, if you don't have the community behind you, it's true. And whatever the growing pains were, it's grown to what it is now. So, kudos to everyone involved over the years and decades. With the Shermans and Carrolls and Tommy and then it started, and Bill Doherty and all those guys, Courtney Bird, and just you keep going on and on and on. There's so many people. This is the fruit of their labor. It's amazing what you see, and then taking it to the next level and the next level and the next level. You have Dave McGilvery and just all these different people with the same goal of the race. That's the important thing. And you see that reflected in like the valet with the bike, valet for the amateur runners, and then, the host families. I remember Catherine Dereba telling me she's from Kenya, and her host family for years would bake Kenyan bread for her and take her blueberry picking. And she loved it every year. Dina Castro, one of our great American marathoners, took her out. Her family, host family, took her out to dinner on Main Street. I can't recall the name of the restaurant, which is no longer there. And she just said to the waiter, "Surprise me." So the waiter brought a big plate of pasta with a lobster on top and cream sauce on top of that, which she loved. And as the waiter's walking away, she said, "How do I eat this?" And he turned around and sort of waved his hands at her, kind of like, "You're using your hands." And she loved it. So she's cracking that thing open, used her hands and a fork with the pasta, ate the whole thing, walked down the street and got her lobster ice cream. I mean, these are memories that these Olympians who have raced all around the globe, they remember these neat little personal stories when I interviewed them for the book. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Years later. You know, and of course they remember the race, but these are great stories.
We actually have a question here for you, which
Sure.
is Russ Pelletier asks, have you seen the Tommy Leonard tribute stone across the street from the quarterdeck? We are dedicating the Tommy Leonard crosswalk this Friday.
Oh, that's right, because they had to delay it. That's right. Yeah, Russ Pelletier brought that along. Yeah, the crosswalk along across the street from the quarterdeck, where Tommy Leonard worked for years. There's a nice monument there, and it was dedicated when not many people could gather several months ago. It's a beautiful stone with a nice plaque. You really should see it. It's at one end of the crosswalk, and the other end of the crosswalk on Main Street is the quarterdeck. And Tommy Leonard was there like almost every day, cutting fruit in the morning, and he would hold court. It was great. You'd walk in there. I remember having lunch with him several times, just shooting the breeze, and he'd always look at the menu. He had his little table there, and I'm going, "Tommy, don't you know this menu, like, you know, back and forth?" "Well, I may change and everything." I look at the waitress. She's like, "Yeah, whatever." You always like the same thing. And he would greet people coming in. I mean, just shooting the breeze with him, having lunch, and then being interrupted like 20, 30, 40 times, which was great. Interrupted is not the right word because he loved it. And it was great. He would come in, talk to everyone who came in. "Oh, Mr. Leonard, Tommy, oh, I'm from Texas. I'm from this. Oh, wait, I remember I've been there." And he would talk. It was his whole face would light up. You know, it's like Superman getting his energy from the sun. He got his energy from people. And in every walk of life, in every instance. So if you can be there for the dedication, it'd be so wonderful that tip your hat to this Marine who just basically put this town on the map in a good way of just being so positive. I mean, it just, I'm sad talking about it sometimes because he's no longer here, but I'm really happy with all the great memories and the time and everything that he's given back. So it's a night. I'm glad Russ brought that up. At that stone, it was a really nice monument too to see.
And we have one more question asking you how many registered this year, and are there any Olympians?
I think there's 8,000. They had to cap it for 8,000, and several Olympians and several former champions. I don't want to start making a list in case I forget any of them. But one of the big ones was Molly Seidel, who just won the bronze in the Olympic marathon. And she announced this before the marathon, that she's going to run Falmouth, and she's going to go out last. And every runner she passes, a donation is going to be made to the Tommy's Place, which is a great place off of Main Street in Tommy Leonard's name. Really, you should look it up. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. So she's going to do that. And she mentioned that even before she competed in the marathon, that she was going to do this as a nice little way to give back. So, it's a great field. I mean, Falmouth has always had, even on Olympic years, they've had great fields, especially since 1980 when Rod Dixon and Greta Weiss won. They were the first international runners that really put it on the mark globally, that international runners said, "Oh, yeah, I kind of heard about Falmouth. Now you hear about it." And they come here to race, and the community welcomes them. I mean, you have people from so many different countries. Falmouth can become an athlete's village, so to speak, in that you'll look around and you'll see people from dozens of countries in this small little town of Falmouth. I love it. It's amazing how it's just welcome. And then some places they come here, they don't have a beach, so they like, oh, I want to go into the water. It's amazing. You know, these great athletes, you don't think of like normal things like, oh, a beach, you know. So it's great, and having the host families and community welcoming. It's a real nice. That's that small town feel that I was mentioning that this race has, in addition to just being this international race. So it's a great combination of the two.
Well, I will thank you so much for doing this talk this morning. I think everyone, if you didn't see it all, or if you want more, his book is A History of the Falmouth Road Race, Running Cape Cod. And as I mentioned, there are signed copies at a cousin's. And of course, we always love it when you shop locally as well as running locally. Thank you so much. Thank to all of you. And this has been recorded. It will be on the library's YouTube page at some point, and also FCTV will probably have it running again. And thank you very much to FCTV for actually filming this today for us. Thanks to you who came to listen, and certainly thanks to Paul for telling us all these great stories, and what a great collection of photos from Falmouth Historical Society as well. Yeah. That was a real treat. So we will end it there. And we look forward to seeing some of you run the marathon. The marathon, yeah, I'm now calling it the marathon, which is interesting. That was actually one of the really interesting pieces. Yeah. That it originally was a marathon, but the Falmouth Road Race, we always love it. It's a great event, and we're so happy that it's come back this year, and we hope all goes well. So thank you all for
thank you very
joining
much.
us today.